welcome back to Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today and we're going to be talking all about life coaching. We have a special guest for y'all, Zerina Derveni. She is going to share with us not just the average things that you know about life coaching, but she is someone that knows how to use transformation as a process for women who look polished, successful on the outside, but maybe quietly struggling on the inside. We know how burnout can really get to us sometimes, but she is going to give us a lot of insight on what she has been able to do, not just with her business, but with all the clients that she's been able to serve. We're going to discover the pain points and we're going to get to the solution. You know how we roll, get right to the point. And I want to first and foremost say to you, Zerina, thank you for your time today. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited to talk about some interesting topics.
Well, I appreciate you clearing your calendar to share your insights with our audience. Let's start out from the very beginning. So when you think about the process of where you were to where you are now professionally, kind of fill us in.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey, and it's interesting because what I specialize in as a life coach right now is self-discovery. And I think looking back at my experience, even with Miss Universe Canada, and then with working as an executive in 3 different companies, I was going through my own kind of self-discovery journey without even realizing it, and trying to figure out, at that time with the knowledge and tools that I had, what was my greater purpose. I think we hear a lot of people talk about purpose, and it sounds great in theory. And I think we all understand that, there's more out there, but I was figuring it out like most of us through trial and error and trying different things and putting myself out there. Most high achieving people, including women, we're just doing a bunch of things at once because I think we're distracting from something in internal. And it was, I look back at my experience, I'm grateful for it, but it was a lot of trial and error and figuring things out and reaching milestones, but a lot of failures too, right? So I think that's one thing that is important to know.
You also dive into emotional intelligence for those who may not heard that word being used frequently. Kind of break down what does emotional intelligence actually mean and how that goes with what you've been able to discover with subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm. So emotional intelligence is understanding your emotions, being able to manage your emotions, and then being able to also understand the emotions of others. So there's a lot of, tools and strategies that are used to be able to tap into your emotional intelligence. And it's something for me that I emphasize a lot on in my coaching. It's interesting because, science will back up that most people are genetically born intelligent, but emotional intelligence, is something that can actually be taught, which is great. So it really is one of those areas in our lives. If we tap more into it, we will understand life so much better. We will be able to manage our emotions so much better. I mean, since I've been, coaching and really diving into emotional intelligence, it's very rare that I get upset nowadays because I just get it. Like, I just understand people. I understand scenarios from an emotional intelligence perspective, versus in the past, I was really, into my intelligence mindset more so. Things were just very black and white, matter of fact. And you lose sight of that, like compassion and empathy and resilience that when you tap into your emotional intelligence, you get. So it is an area that I focus a lot on. And the women that I coach, it's getting them from this IQ mindset into EQ. And we go even a little bit deeper later into AQ, which is all about being able to adapt. So IQ gets you in the door, EQ keeps you in the room, AQ lets you grow in the building. So I think that's like a analogy that I use that's helpful to understand.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio. And our guest today, she has a website, ZerinaLifeCoach.com. Make sure you go check that out and check out all the amazing resources that she has. Let's think about or discuss about high achieving women. Like we said in the intro, that's what you're focused on with your business. When you think about how high achieving women, they may seem like they have it all together, but at times they can be struggling with burnout or feeling unfulfilled inside. Why do you think that in today's fast paced world, especially with digital age, that seems to be a constant thing?
I think a lot of us subconsciously are in this performative act, right? We're constantly just performing. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're juggling a bunch of things. We spend most of our time at work. When we're at work, there is this performative state that we're usually on. So I think that performative state really is what leads to burnout, and then not being able to, of course, put in boundaries and standards for yourself doesn't help either, right? That attributes to more burnout. But from what I've seen, and from the hundreds of people that I've spoken to and coached, there is this performative act that we put on, unfortunately, because we are high achievers. We know what needs to get done. We know what needs to get something over the line, and to succeed, that can be exhausting. So really, it's that transition between being performative to actually being. And doesn't mean you don't need to have skill set there, but it's really having more clarity and having a more clear purpose of where you want to spend your energy on. So probably that would be my answer, is that performative state is really what leads to burnout, and this external validation expectation that we put on ourselves that we need to meet, when the more you do that, the less you're focusing on your internal alignment.
I like that because I think men do that too, as far as get caught up in the performance of I must be at this level at amount of time, you know. So with that in mind, how can people recognize that ambition no longer serving them? Because you can only let that ambition be a mask for so long until reality sets in, and it's like, uh-oh, I might have to like do some more deep search on this thing.
Yeah. I believe, and I also believe this for men too. I mean, as women, we are gifted with intuition, but men have it too, right? There is a sense of something's off. And I think that's a really good starting point. I call it the awakening phase, where you feel like something is just not working the way it used to work, right? I think there is a state of hustle mentality that we need to do. I mean, nothing is given to us on a platter. Like, there has to be work that goes into it. But at what point do you still keep that survival mode and not transition into a more thriving mode? So I think all of us at some point have this feeling where we think something needs to change. And when you're in that awakening phase, I do encourage you to really dig a little bit deeper. Give yourself some time to really understand, like, what around you, what around your environment needs to change. I do a lot of work in the subconscious mind. So I'm currently being certified as a brain coach. But really, the reason why I'm so fascinated by the subconscious mind is a lot of our habits are in the subconscious mind, our belief system, our values. So it's like, how many of us are recycling what that is? Like, are we still working from that mindset from 10 years ago and still kind of doing the same thing over and over again, like every day? So it's really honoring yourself. I mean, for me, it's the biggest form of self-respect, is being able to listen to that voice, being in that awakening stage, and really stepping back and honoring yourself. And people think that clarity comes from thought, right? And it doesn't. That's silly. Like, clarity comes from exploration. So if you honor that voice, that awakening stage, start to ask yourself questions, start to explore, I think you'll be at a better spot to gain clarity into your life and make some changes that are going to be more impactful and better for you.
I agree because ideas look good on surface level, but until you actually take the action and see the reality afterwards, you can't make any adjustments just with a thought. If life was that easy, I don't think we would have to have any interviews. But when you think of your practical tools that you use with transformation with your clients, you also blend mindset coaching with brain-based tools. You kind of teased us with some things that you're being trained on right now in the moment. Can you share for our viewers and our listeners one or two strategies that they can use themselves in order for them to shift from overthinking to a little bit more clarity.
Yeah. So I actually love this overthinking concept because I'm a big overthinker. I still struggle with it. So it's not something that you can just switch off and on, unfortunately, but it is something that you can work with. And a lot of my clients, probably 98% of them are overthinkers. And it's understanding why we overthink. And if you really pay attention to scenarios, it's usually when there's uncertainty, we start to overthink. There is this false sense of control that we've programmed our brain that overthinking is going to help us find the solution. So that's one area. Another reason why we overthink is we somehow assume, because remember, our brain is so smart and tricks us, but we somehow assume that there is a hidden message. This is all happening subconsciously, by the way, right? We're not sitting there thinking what's the hidden message, but this is why our brain is wired to overthink. We're trying to find this hidden message. We're trying to do replays. We're trying to figure out something that is not there to be figured out, right? I think overthinking can be helpful in complex situation that you need to think analytically, but then that's it, stop, and be present and be in the moment. So I think going back and understanding why we overthink in certain scenarios, and like I said, most of the time it's because there is uncertainty. Well, guess what? Life is all about uncertainty. So you're going to really like drain yourself if you think every time you're in a scenario of being uncertain, you're going to, obviously fry your brain and honestly not even enjoy life. I think I get in those, remember, especially when I was younger, I would get in those moments where I would just overthink and I lose sight of the beauty of life, right? So the definition of overthinking is important. I think going back to basics and then understanding why we overthink, looking at some scenarios, and then how do we, implement tools and strategies to help? Well, first of all, learning your behaviors is a great tool to start with, right? Because then you can pick up on it and then you can pause and you can tell yourself, okay, like this is what I'm doing. Is this scenario really worth my energy efficiency? So I talk a lot about energy efficiency because a lot of what happens in the subconscious and conscious mind takes up a lot of energy from us, So we're fueling all our energy in this one scenario. Is that scenario really worth it? Like, is it going to really make a big impact? And I think it's being able to regulate yourself and ask yourself those questions, because those are like the logical questions that will help you kind of push back versus some of the fluff that you hear out there, like, oh, don't worry, stay positive, stay optimistic. Like, you got to keep it real with yourself and say, okay, is this scenario that I spend, let's say, 4 hours overthinking on really worth my energy efficiency? Most of the time, honestly, it's a no, right? And then it's like, okay, do I have this perceived false idea that I have control because I'm overthinking? Yeah, okay, but do I have really control? No. Okay, next, right? What is the hidden message? 9 out of 10 times, there is no hidden message. That one time there is, it's not really even worth the energy again to overthink. So it's asking yourself these logical questions. These are all, science-based. I mean, as you can imagine, science are very conservative, and when they come up with solutions, it's very practical. But I think the practical stuff is really more important. And unfortunately, like when you overthink, you get triggered during uncertain times. So just build some resilience and know that life is going to be uncertain. And if you have to overthink, make it worth a scenario, please. So that'd be my advice.
And when you think about your experience, you also lived in Australia. So not just having experience in Canada and, success there, but being able to taste and see, different parts of the world, different cultures and different experiences. How much does that really, will you say personally, has helped you just be rooted, not just in knowing yourself, but being able to put yourself out there in the world more effectively with the fact that you've been able to experience different cultures?
Yeah. I'm actually European, born in Europe, moved to Germany, moved to Canada, went to Australia for a year after university. So I think having exposure to so many different cultures has been so beneficial, just to understand the impact that our culture has on us. There's this psychologist, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, but I remember learning this in university. But there's a psychologist that believes that our identity is a blend of blood and soil. So based on where you're from, like where you're born, if you are born in a certain country, and then your bloodline, right? So I think having seen and traveled so much and communicated with so many people from all walks of life, there are commonalities that we all strive for, but there also are differences. And some cultures, there is more expectations, right? And I think the overthinking is triggered just culturally. Growing up, it's normal, right? Like, don't make a mistake, like don't do that. And I think that's just learned from childhood. But again, I think, when we are transitioning into adulthood, I think it's everybody's responsibility. Like, this is where it's accountability informed, but it's everybody's responsibility to step back and think about, how they're behaving day to day, and how they can improve their lives by incorporating tools and strategies that help them in personal development. But traveling the world has opened my eyes to so many things. It's humbled me. It's made me grounded to understand that, life is different. Life is hard. But a lot of us as just human beings, a lot of our fears, desires, they're very similar. It's just maybe our strategies, I call it, the way we move and the way we think is just different.
Being a life coach, having the experience you have today versus when you first decided that you're going to give it a shot, what some valuable lessons that you learned with your clients that has sharpened you and helped position you to even add continuous value to your community?
Yeah. So I think I'm still gathering data right now with the women that I coach, but there are commonalities right now. And I'm noticing that the high achieving women, there seems to be this lack of nurturing from their mothers growing up. So they have great mothers. This is nothing to do about, nothing to bring up about the past in the sense of like childhood trauma, but there is a sense of lack of nurturing. So this hardness that they have, this wanting to prove and outdo themselves, does stem from childhood. So there are a lot of components of my coaching that I think when I first went in, I was really interested in helping people move forward in life. I think therapy does such a great job with talking about the past, but coaches, really our job is to help people move forward. And I see that's where the energy efficiency should be spent, right? But I think, getting into it and understanding and learning about high achieving women, there are some commonalities that I'm starting to find out. And then as a coach, I feel, curious to learn more so I can help them through their journey as much as I can without overstepping my boundaries as a coach. But there are definitely some commonalities. That's one, and that's a big one. And I think when I bring it up, it's always, keep in mind, I have to do this in a very compassionate way, but it's always in a way like, oh, but really, like, you think that's like affecting? And it's like, yes, because like, you're overdoing it. Sometimes like people pleasing, sometimes saying yes. And it stems from this little girl trying to prove something now as an adult. And I think once we, peel back those layers and unfortunately have real conversations that are raw, not only am I there to help them fix a certain problem, but it's to prepare them for life so that when they encounter these, they're not, again, operating from a place of old habits. They're operating from a new mindset and new learned habits, and hopefully they continue that journey.
Once again, listen to our Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Zerina Derveni. Go to her website, zerinalifecoach.com. Also, I want to touch on your experience with the corporate world, because being able to come from the corporate side of things and transitioning to your own boss, your business, and building that, what are some valuable lessons that you've learned being the daily grind in the corporate office and translating those values into entrepreneurship life?
Yeah. I mean, I had such great mentors and great like colleagues that I work with in the corporate world. So that I find that, when you have resources, when you have great colleagues and mentorship, yes, you still have to put in the work. And I definitely did. I had long hours. I was consistent. I was committed. Um, you don't realize when you go on your own that the lack of resources really does start to take a toll on you because you're doing everything. And I started when I started my coaching business, I went in with the mindset knowing I was going to work very hard. I didn't think it was going to be easy, but once you're in the grind and once you understand how hard it is to start something, so small, right? And so new, it definitely was a wake up call, not in a scary way, but in a way where I had to be much more strategic with my time. There was a lot of decisions I was making, it was all on me, and it was a great learning experience where it's like really testing me and testing my values as a professional, right? I think my journey hasn't been the fast growth, but that's because there's a lot of integrity involved. So it's really understanding that, what you did in the corporate world, great, but a lot of your strengths and skills will be tested when you actually go the entrepreneurial route. And it's a lot of work, but kind of going back to when you search for purpose and clarity and you don't care. Like, I don't care. Like, I'll put in 16-hour days. I really like it. It comes from a place of like passion. I'm tired, but I never complain. Versus had I been in corporate, I would have been like, oh no, what is this? I would have felt like a slave. But yeah, it's definitely been a transition in a positive way, but a lot of, the professionalism, the work ethic, some best practices, I've taken it from corporate. But then again, like, I've had to learn a lot of new skills that I'm grateful for the hard way and continue to learn.
And that's what I want to zoom in on, skills, because when you're developing professionally, there's a lot of pain with that process, because when you're honest with yourself, until you start surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you and can pull you up and show you the routes, it's going to be a very tough process. It's going to be a tough go. It might be 4 flats, not just one. How do you deal with those points of pressure when you start to say, oh, wow, this is how it's going to be like? It's not really cookie cutter. I'm going to have to make some adjustments with my plans. Kind of explain that to the audience. What have you discovered with that?
Yeah, so I think sometimes when you're in the corporate bubble, you think life works a certain way, and then you get out of it and you realize how life really works. There is this, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it's just a little bit different. And for me personally, like, I think I've had to learn the hard way that, growing a business, it really is about how much, again, you yourself are putting in the effort, but also how many opportunities you're able to attract, right? I think no matter how great you are at something or passionate about something, if you're not getting results, then it doesn't, it doesn't really matter. So I've had to kind of learn a little bit the hard way where, results are important and results are important to achieve, and being a bit more harsher with myself and maybe less of the creativity that I really wanted to explore and more like business focus. And it's like, okay, like, if you want to do this long term, like, you really have to put in, a different kind of business hat and maybe make decisions that you never thought before. So there are some harsh realities of, I'm really big on integrity, and I have no problem saying no to things that I don't think will serve me well. But there are other areas where I'm like, okay, no, you have to be more open, and you have to explore, and you have to collaborate, and you have to put in, the time and effort. Like, there is no room to be, I don't want to use the word princess, but do you know what I mean? Like, you can't be picky when you're trying to grow a business. Like, you got to go out there and really like hustle and put yourself out there and believe in your craft. I think that's another one. So
you got to get creative. Because if it
Yeah.
rains and don't have an umbrella, well, you just got to make it happen.
Exactly. No, it's been interesting, but there's been some learning curves where you just, pivot, transition, move forward, learn new things, pivot, transition, move forward. And I think for me, I visually see this greater purpose. I actually read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill right before I started. One of my mentors suggested it, and it was really good to read it at that stage of my life, because there are some important elements there that he talks about. And it's just, again, the reality of life, right? It's really the people you're around, surrounding yourself with smart people, believing in yourself, having that greater purpose. Like, those are all things that we hear, but how much of it are we actually adapting in our day-to-day lives?
I have a T-shirt for you that you can steal and create and sell. It's what you
Oh,
said:
wonderful.
pivot, transition, and move forward. I really like that. That is genius. That's really good, because anytime you hit a roadblock or something, setback, that's a nice 3 bullet point thing to think on: pivot, transition, move forward, because you don't just dwell on it. You
Yeah.
understand what is actually required in order for things to change. Like, it starts with you. It begins and ends with the person you see in the mirror. My last question for you as we wrap this up is understanding that your clients, you're growing with them. Like you said, you're still getting some training done. You mentioned earlier in the show. And wrapping up, your final thoughts is, what is next for the brand? What are some of the things that you can tease for our audience that you're building in the lab for the next chapter?
Yeah. So I think right now I've got two projects that I'm kind of working on behind the scenes while still focusing on my coaching. One of them is I'm coming up with a self discovery blueprint, a digital one where anyone can really access it. And I think it's an important intro. It's simple. Again, it's got a lot of best practices as well as science based. I think that's important. But it's helping someone ask those questions of, who am I? You know, what am I doing? Why do I keep kind of repeating these same old patterns? It's a good introduction, because I think unless you're very open to coaching or therapy or any professional services, some people are not, or some people, they want a little bit of a taste or an intro. So I've been working on that this year, and hopefully we'll launch that. But I think it'll be really helpful for anybody who's just curious, or maybe wants to learn a little bit about themselves, and having something that's more, in my opinion, modern and effective. I'm really big on results. So everything that I do, I really will research every little thing to find like what would resonate well, right? So that's one that I'm working on. I'm really excited about. Another is again, discussion with this, and I think it's going to take a little bit longer because my focus is on other things. But I would love to have a podcast where I can talk about these challenges that women are facing, but talk about it from a, again, raw perspective. Talk about it from storytelling, and talk about how people move forward. I'm really into authentic conversations, and I think sometimes what we see in mainstream media, there's just a lot of performance there. So having a show where we can be, raw, professional, but so, helpful, is something I aspire to have. So hopefully that's in the works sooner rather than later.
And for the audience and myself, say your full name for us. I want to make sure I get this right. I cannot leave and make sure I get this right. Can you say your full name for us?
Yes, it's Zerina Derveni.
Awesome. Well, once again, you've been listening on Refocused Radio, and we had true honor talking to Zerina. I want to say to you, thank you for your time on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.